I wasn't supposed to be home for another month. My business trip overseas had been extended, and I'd even told my neighbors I wouldn't be back until late summer. That's why, when my driver pulled up to my mansion late one night and I saw lights on inside, my first thought was someone's robbing me. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, but then I saw her standing in my living room, wearing my silk robe and sipping wine from my crystal glass. Was none other than Karen, the president of the local HOA. Her blonde hair was tied back, her feet were propped up on my glass coffee table, and she was laughing on the phone like she owned the place. At first, she froze when she saw me. Then, unbelievably, she had the nerve to say, "You can't just walk in here. This property is under HOA inspection." My jaw nearly hit the floor. Inspection? You've been living here. Her excuse. I had left the home unattended, and she didn't want it to fall into disrepair. But the empty wine bottles, luxury shopping bags, and her little yappy dog, chewing my Persian rug, told another story. Before I could even get a word in, she called the cops on me. She told them I was an intruder and refusing to leave. That night turned into one of the most insane, infuriating, and downright unbelievable showdowns of my life. But by the end of it, Karen wouldn't just be out of my house. She'd be out of the HOA presidency for good, and I had the proof to make it happen. I wasn't supposed to be home for another month. My overseas trip had been extended, and I'd told almost everyone I knew, including the HOA president, Karen, that I wouldn't be back until late summer. I'd even set my home's lights to a timer, locked every door, and arranged for a friend to collect my mail once a week. The place was supposed to be empty. That's why, when my driver pulled up in front of my mansion at 11 o'clock that night and I saw the upstairs bedroom light glowing, my heart dropped out at first. I thought it might be my friend dropping something off, but then I saw movement. A figure walking from the master bedroom toward the balcony. I could make out the silhouette of a woman, hair tied up, moving around like she owned the place. My pulse quickened. This wasn't just a light accidentally left on. Someone was in my home. I told the driver to wait, quietly got out, and unlocked the front gate. The faint hum of music floated out from inside, along with the smell of something cooking, garlic and butter, rich and warm. My mind was racing. A burglar wouldn't be cooking a late-night dinner, a squatter maybe. But how would they even get past the gate security? When I opened the front door, I froze, standing in the middle of my living room, wearing my silk robe, and holding one of my best crystal wine glasses, was none other than Karen, the HOA president herself. She didn't even flinch at first. She was mid-laugh chatting on her phone, legs casually crossed on my glass coffee table like it was her personal lounge. Her voice caught when she saw me. I'll call you back," she said into the phone before setting it down. Then she had the audacity to put her hands on her hips and say, "You can't just walk in here like that. This property is under HOA inspection." I blinked at her, certain I'd misheard. "Inspection? Karen, you're in my robe," she scoffed. "You left this house unattended for weeks. The HOA has a responsibility to ensure properties in the neighborhood don't fall into disrepair. I've been staying here to keep an eye on things." I glanced around, keeping an eye on things, or helping yourself to my wine, my clothes. My eye looked down just in time to see a small yappy white dog trotting across the rug, chewing one of my leather shoes. "Is that your dog?" She didn't even look embarrassed. "Well, I couldn't just leave him at home. He needs company." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Karen, you've been living here." She waved a hand dismissively. "It's temporary, and frankly, you should be thanking me. This place is spotless. I've even handled a few maintenance issues you were neglecting." I stepped further into the room, spotting several luxury shopping bags stacked in the corner, high-end brands I'd never buy, the kind of boutiques Karen was known for frequenting. "You've been using my address for deliveries." Before she could answer, she whipped out her phone. "You know what? I don't feel safe with you here. You're acting aggressive. I'm calling the police." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "You're calling the police on me? In my own house?" Her fingers were already dialing. "Yes, and I'll be telling them you're an intruder refusing to leave." The ridiculousness of it hit me in waves. Here I was, the actual homeowner, about to have cops show up because the HOA president decided to play Manchester and apparently believed her word carried more weight than a property deed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. Karen smirked like she'd already won. "They know me. They'll believe me over some angry man who just showed up unannounced." When the police pulled up, 2 officers stepped out. I was halfway relieved, halfway furious. I'd dealt with enough nonsense from Karen to know she was about to put on a performance. Sure enough, the moment the officers walked in, she clutched her chest and exclaimed, "Officers, thank goodness you're here. This man broke into the home I'm overseeing for the HOA." I opened my mouth, but she kept talking rapid, like she was reading from a prepared statement. "He's been aggressive, shouting at me, and I'm honestly afraid for my safety." One of the officers turned to me. "Sir, can we see some ID?" I handed over my driver's license and house keys, explaining the situation in as calm a voice as I could manage. "This is my house. I've been overseas for work. I came home early, and she's been squatting here." Karen jumped in. He's lying. This property was empty. HOA protocol allows us to secure it and prevent vandalism. I've been staying here with full authority. I locked eyes with the officer holding my ID. Full authority. From who? Because I never gave her permission. And unless the HOA suddenly owns my house, this is trespassing. The other officer glanced around, clearly taking in the wine bottles, the dog, and the shopping bags. Ma'am, he said to Karen, do you have any legal documentation granting you residency here? She hesitated, just for a moment, but it was enough. I don't have it on me, but it's in the HOA files. That's fine, I said, pulling out my phone. We can clear this up right now. I tapped into my home's security app and pulled up the footage. The cameras had caught everything. Karen arriving 2 weeks ago with suitcases, bringing in bags day after day, even hosting a small gathering last weekend in my backyard. When the officers saw the footage, their expressions shifted. Karen's confident smirk faltered. That's out of context, she stammered. Looks pretty in context to me, I said. The officers asked her to step outside to talk. I could hear her voice rising as she insisted it was all for the good of the community. But the truth was, she'd been caught red-handed and she knew it. Standing there in my living room, surrounded by the evidence of her 2-week vacation at my expense, I felt my anger solidify into something else. Determination. Karen wasn't just going to walk away from this. She'd crossed a line, and I was going to make sure she paid for it. The officers didn't arrest Karen that night, but they made it clear she had to leave immediately. She tried to stall, insisting she had personal items to collect, but they kept a watchful eye as she shoved clothes, shoes, and toiletries into her suitcase. I stood near the front door, arms crossed, silently watching her parade out the evidence of her stay. Every now and then she'd mutter something under her breath about ungrateful neighbors and how this will look for the H. When she finally walked out, she paused at the threshold and glared at me. You've made a mistake, she said, her voice low and bitter. I was doing you a favor. You'll regret treating me like this. I didn't reply. I just shut the door. The moment it clicked shut, the silence inside the house felt heavy. I walked through each room checking for anything missing or damaged. In the kitchen I found the fridge stuffed with expensive cheeses, wine, and gourmet snacks I never bought. My home office desk had been moved, drawers opened. In the master bedroom she'd swapped my bedding for her own floral patterned sheets. Even my bathroom counters were crowded with her perfumes, lotions, and makeup. She'd been living here like it was her personal villa, but the worst part was discovering that security cameras in several key rooms had been unplugged. Luckily, the outdoor and hallway ones were still running, so I still had plenty of footage. I downloaded everything to a secure drive, labeling each clip with a date and time. That night, I didn't sleep much. My mind was racing. Karen wasn't the type to quietly disappear. She thrived on control, and her position as HOA president gave her a network of loyal busybodies. By morning, she'd already be spinning her version of the story. Sure enough, at 8 a.m., I received my first text from a neighbor. Heard you had some trouble last night. Karen says you lost your temper when you found her helping maintain your house a few minutes later. Another, what's this about the police being called? Karen says it was a misunderstanding. By mid-morning, I was fuming. Karen wasn't just trying to justify herself, she was painting me as unstable. I decided then and there that I wasn't going to defend myself piecemeal to each neighbor. I was going to make my case once, clearly, and publicly. I started by calling Mark, a lawyer I'd used for property matters before. After hearing the story, he whistled. That's trespassing, plain and simple. And the HOA president, that's a big liability for them. You've got footage, right? Hours of it, I said. Good. Document everything. Dates, times, what she touched, what she moved, who came over while she was there. If she brought guests, that's even worse for her. I told him about the backyard party. It's on video, about a dozen people, music, drinks, definitely not house maintenance. Mark chuckled dryly. She's cooked. But listen, don't confront her directly anymore. Every word you say will be twisted. Let me handle it from here. I agreed. But I still needed to protect my reputation in the neighborhood. I knew the HOA's next meeting was scheduled for the following week. Karen would be running it, and no doubt she'd try to control the narrative. That gave me 6 days to gather every shred of evidence and make sure it was undeniable. The next step was talking to the gate security. My community had 24-hour guards, and every vehicle entry was logged. When I showed up at the front gate, the guard on duty looked uneasy. Mr. Wallace, he said, I heard about, well, last night. Yeah, I said, I need to see the logs for the past 3 weeks. He hesitated. I'm not sure I'm supposed to release that without HOA approval. Then call your supervisor, I said, because those logs are part of a police report now. That got his attention. Within minutes, I had a printed list of every vehicle that had entered under my address code. Karen's car showed up multiple times a day. There were also entries for several vehicles I didn't recognize, likely her friends. I scanned the sheet and asked, do you remember seeing any moving trucks or deliveries too? He said, one was a grocery delivery, the other furniture, but I thought you'd ordered it. I hadn't. That meant she'd been ordering things to my house and possibly sending them elsewhere. Back at home, I decided to dig into my credit reports and bank accounts, just in case. Thankfully, nothing had been charged to me, but the thought of how close she might have come made my skin crawl. The day after, I started quietly reaching out to neighbors I trusted, people who'd seen Karen's power games before. I showed them some of the footage. Their reactions were a mix of disbelief and amusement. She really just made herself at home, my neighbor Tom said, shaking his head. That's bold, even for her. Do me a favor, I said. If she tries to talk about it before the meeting, tell her you're reserving judgment until you hear my side. By day 4, I had a neat little file. Footage of Karen arriving with luggage. Footage of her bringing her dog, grocery bags, and shopping hauls inside. Footage of the backyard gathering. Gate logs showing repeated visits from unknown vehicles. Security audio of her telling the officers she had authority to be there. Mark, my lawyer, was impressed. We're going to knock her right out of that president's chair, he said, and the HOA board will thank us for it. She's a legal nightmare now. Still, I knew Karen wouldn't roll over. She had a knack for making herself seem like the victim, and there were a few neighbors who believed everything she said. I needed to present my case in a way that left no room for interpretation. The night before the meeting, I set up my own projector in the living room, rehearsing my delivery. I wasn't going to yell or make it personal. I was going to lay out the facts, calm, clear, and damning. When the day came, the community center was already buzzing when I arrived. Karen was there, dressed sharply in a navy blazer, her expression cool and unreadable. She gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. As the meeting started, she launched into a report about recent security incidents and misunderstandings regarding property oversight. She even threw in a dig about residents needing to communicate their travel plans more responsibly. I waited until she was done. Then I raised my hand. I'd like to address the board with something important. The room quieted. I connected my laptop to the projector. The first clip rolled Karen hauling her suitcase up my driveway. Then her dog trotting in. Then the party. Then her telling police she had authority to be there. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I didn't speak over the footage. I just let it play, clip after clip, the dates and times stamped clearly in the corner. When it ended, I turned to the board. This is what happened while I was away, I said evenly. Karen entered my home without permission, stayed there for 2 weeks, held gatherings, and lied to the police when I came back early. The HOA never had and never will have the authority to occupy private homes without the owner's consent. This was trespassing, plain and simple. For a moment, the room was silent. Then the murmurs started. People shifted in their seats. One board member leaned toward Karen. Is this true? Karen's face was pale, but she still tried. That footage is taken out of context. I was out of context. I said, my voice still calm. You're on video unpacking your luggage, cooking in my kitchen, and hosting a party. That's not property oversight. The board chair cleared his throat. Given the seriousness of this matter, I think it's best we call an immediate vote of no confidence in the HOA president, Karen sputtered. But the damage was done. I leaned back in my chair, letting the process unfold. She'd made this personal, but I was making it official, and this was only the beginning. The board vote was quick. 6 members voted to remove Karen from the presidency, 1 abstained, and only one, her closest ally, Marlene, voted to keep her. The decision was final, effective immediately. Karen's face tightened as the chair announced it. She didn't storm out like I have expected. Instead, she sat still, back straight, eyes fixed on me with a cold, unreadable expression. When the meeting adjourned, she gathered her papers, stood, and walked out without a word. I knew that wasn't the end. People like Karen didn't vanish quietly. They regrouped, plotted, and struck back harder. Sure enough, the next morning, I woke up to a series of text messages and emails. Some were from neighbors congratulating me on finally putting her in her place. Others were less friendly. I can't believe you embarrassed Karen like that. You didn't have to make it public. She's been a good president for years. Hope you're happy. She's talking about suing. The last one caught my attention. Suing? For what? Trespassing wasn't exactly something you could spin into a winning lawsuit. But if Karen was telling people she was taking me to court, I needed to be ready. I called Mark, my lawyer. She's threatening to sue me, I said. He laughed. She can try. What's she going to claim? Defamation. We've got video proof of her actions. The truth is an absolute defense. Yeah, but she's spreading rumors. Some people believe her. That's exactly why we're going on offense, Mark said. You've got grounds to press charges. Not just for trespassing. We can look at theft, fraud, maybe even animal damage from that dog chewing your property. I thought about it for a moment. I wasn't a vindictive person, but the more I replayed those clips of her parading around my home, the more I felt the weight of her arrogance. She had walked in, acted like she owned the place, then tried to flip the narrative and paint me as the bad guy. Let's do it, I said. That afternoon, Mark filed a formal criminal complaint. We submitted the police report from the night. I returned, along with the security footage and the gate logs. It was airtight. Meanwhile, Karen had started her own campaign. She wasn't just talking to neighbors, she was calling local reporters. By the following week, a headline appeared in the community section of the paper: HOA president claims harassment after dispute with homeowner. The article was full of quotes from Karen. She called me volatile and disrespectful, saying I'd ambushed her after she volunteered her time to watch over my home. She even claimed the police had been misled by edited video footage. The nerve! I didn't respond to the paper, but I knew the damage could spread if I stayed quiet. Instead, I contacted an investigative reporter I knew through a friend, someone who didn't take stories at face value. I gave her the entire file: unedited video, police statements, HOA meeting minutes, the works. 2 days later, her article ran online: former HOA president caught on camera living in neighbor's mansion without permission. It didn't just tell my side, it showed it. Screenshots from the footage appeared in the article, along with stills of the party and her unloading groceries. The reporter even included a quote from one of the police officers confirming she'd been asked to leave the property immediately. That story spread fast. By evening, it was being shared in local Facebook groups, where the comment sections lit up. Some people defended her, saying it was all a misunderstanding. But most were shocked, and a good number were downright furious at her abuse of authority. Karen, of course, doubled down. She posted a long Facebook rant about invasions of privacy and malicious neighbors. But the problem with her rant was that she never addressed the simplest question: why she was in my home at all. 3 days later, the police followed up on the complaint. They called me to let me know they were moving forward with charges for criminal trespass and unlawful entry. Mark was thrilled. She's looking at fines, community service, maybe probation, he said. And when the HOA sees that in the public record, they're going to be even more relieved you pushed for this. But Karen still had one last play, and it came out of nowhere. One evening, around 9 o'clock, I was sitting in my study when I heard a knock at the door. I checked the camera. It was Marlene, the one board member who had voted to keep her. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. When I opened the door, Marlene wasted no time. She wants to make a deal, she said. I raised an eyebrow. A deal? She's willing to publicly apologize and step away from the HOA for good if you drop the charges. I almost laughed. She's already been removed, and the charges aren't something I can just drop. The police are handling it. She's scared, Marlene said. She doesn't want this to go to court. You've made your point. Don't ruin her life. I thought about the weeks of lies, the smear campaign, the way she'd tried to weaponize the police against me. I thought about the dog chewing my rug, the party in my backyard, and the shopping bags stacked in my foyer. Her life isn't my concern, I said finally. She made her choices. I'm just making sure she's accountable for them. Marlene, mouth tightened. Then you'll regret it. She's not done. She left without another word. 2 days later, I found out what she meant. Karen had filed a countercomplaint with the HOA's insurance, claiming I had damaged her property, specifically her dog's crate and a suitcase she'd brought to my house. She wanted the HOA's insurance to pay her for emotional distress and property loss. It was laughable, but it was also a reminder of who I was dealing with. She would twist reality until it snapped if it meant getting what she wanted. Mark handled it swiftly, sending a letter to the insurance company with all the evidence. This claim is retaliatory and unfounded, it said plainly. Within a week, the insurance company dismissed it. Still, the whole ordeal left me on edge. Karen had been stripped of her position. Her reputation was crumbling, and now she was facing criminal charges, yet she was still clawing for some kind of win. The first court date was set for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, I decided to secure my home like never before. I upgraded my security system, added more cameras, and even had the locks changed, just in case she got any ideas about another inspection. The day before the hearing, I received an email from Karen's lawyer. It was short and to the point. My client wishes to avoid further litigation and is willing to plead to a reduced charge if you agree not to pursue restitution. I called Mark. What do you think? She's cornered, he said. This is her, a way of walking away without admitting too much guilt. But you have leverage. If we push, we might get restitution for the damages and legal fees. I thought about it. A public plea would be satisfying, but part of me wanted the community to see her formally held responsible. Push, I said. Mark sent back a guilty plea, full restitution for damages, and a public apology at the next HOA meeting. To my surprise, she agreed. The next evening, I walked into the community center for the monthly meeting. Karen was already there, sitting in the back. When her turn came, she stood up, cleared her throat, and read from a piece of paper. I would like to apologize to the residents of this community, and to Mr. Wallace, for my actions. I entered his home without permission, and my conduct was inappropriate. I accept responsibility and will be stepping away from any leadership roles in the HOA. She read it without much emotion, but it didn't matter. The words were on the record. The room was silent when she finished. She sat down, eyes fixed on the floor. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look at her. I'd gotten what I wanted. Accountability. and the end of her reign over the neighborhood. But as I left the meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't the type to simply fade away, and I had a nagging suspicion I'd be seeing her again, just not in the way she expected. For a few weeks after her apology, the neighborhood felt strangely calm. Without Karen running the HOA, the board meetings were quieter, friendlier. The endless stream of petty violation notices stopped. People were actually planting flowers in their yards without worrying about approved color schemes. It was as if the entire place had taken a collective deep breath. I started to think maybe Karen really had retreated into the background. She still lived in her large colonial house at the far end of the cul-de-sac, but her car wasn't in and out of the neighborhood as much. I didn't see her walking that yappy white dog anymore, and there were no late-night lights blazing in her upstairs windows. Still, something about the silence didn't sit right with me. Karen wasn't a go-quietly kind of person. She had been embarrassed, stripped of her title, forced to apologize, all in front of the same people she'd lorded over for years. If there was one thing I'd learned about her, it was that she hated losing control. My suspicion was confirmed one Thursday morning when a thick manila envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just my name printed in bold black letters. Inside, I found a stack of printed screenshots, images from my own home security cameras. The first few were normal enough. Me walking into my garage, unloading groceries, standing on my front porch talking to a neighbor. But then I noticed something chilling. The times, they were from just a week ago. Someone had been accessing my security feeds without my permission. I checked my system immediately. Sure enough, one of the remote access passwords had been changed 2 weeks earlier. I hadn't authorized it. That when someone had hacked in, and given the circumstances, my mind went straight to Karen. I called Mark, my lawyer. "You're not going to believe this," I said, explaining the envelope and the hacked cameras. He was quiet for a moment. "That's not just trespassing anymore. That's cyber intrusion. It's a crime in its own category. We need to go to the police." We did, and the detective I spoke to took it seriously. "If she's monitoring your cameras, she's potentially been recording you without consent," he said. "That's a big deal." They took the screenshots, along with the system logs showing the unauthorized access. 2 days later, the detective called me back. "We traced the IP address used to log into your system. It belongs to an account registered to Karen Miller." It was like déjà vu. Once again, she had left a trail of arrogance behind her. Mark moved quickly, filing for a restraining order that would keep her from coming within 100 feet of my property, physically or digitally. The police also seized her personal devices for forensic analysis. That's when the real twist came. A week later, the detective called me into the station. He had a folder in front of him, thick with printed reports. "We found a lot more than just your security feeds," he said. "Karen's been accessing several other residents' cameras, and in one case, she was monitoring a family's nanny cam." I sat back in my chair, stunned. "She's been spying on people. Looks that way." And she kept records, notes about when people were home, when they were gone, even when deliveries arrived. It was worse than I'd imagined. Karen hadn't just been obsessed with control. She'd been running a full-blown surveillance operation on the neighborhood. The police moved forward with multiple counts of unlawful surveillance, and the story exploded. This time, it wasn't just local Facebook groups talking. It hit the regional news. The headline was brutal: "Former HOA president charged in neighborhood spying scheme." They even used a picture from her HOA election flyer, smiling stiffly. In her blazer, the article laid out the charges, the details from the police report, and of course, my case as the first known victim. The neighborhood turned on her almost overnight. People who had once defended her were suddenly avoiding eye contact at the grocery store. Several residents called me to thank me for going to the police. They'd had odd feelings for months about her knowing too much about their schedules, but Karen still wasn't finished. 3 nights after the news broke, I came home to find my garage door halfway open. Inside, a can of red spray paint had been hurled against the wall, leaving a dripping stain. My security system caught the culprit, a hooded figure in dark clothes. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but the build, the walk, the way the person we carried themselves, it looked an awful lot like Karen. I sent the clip to the detective. He didn't commit to saying it was her, but he promised to add it to the case file. "She's getting desperate," he said. "Don't engage her directly. Let us handle it." I followed his advice, even though my patience was wearing thin. I reinforced my garage door, upgraded my camera resolution, and started keeping my car in a locked driveway gate. I also noticed more police patrols in the neighborhood, a silent reminder that she was being watched now. Then came the court date for her cyber intrusion charges. I sat in the back of the courtroom as she was led in, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her hair was flat, her blazer replaced by a plain gray sweater. She didn't look at me, not once. The prosecutor laid out the case, the unauthorized access, the surveillance of multiple residents, the notes she'd kept. They even brought in one of the other victims to testify, a young mother who said Karen had been monitoring her nanny cam. When the judge asked Karen if she wanted to make a statement, she shook her head. Her lawyer spoke instead, claiming It was all a misunderstanding and that she'd only been checking on friends' properties. The judge didn't buy it. She was found guilty on multiple misdemeanor counts, sentenced to probation, community service, and a hefty fine. She was also ordered to stay away from all the victims, myself included. For the next 3 years, it should have felt like the end. But as I left the courthouse, walking down the steps into the cool afternoon air, I had the same uneasy feeling I'd had after her first apology. People like Karen didn't just disappear. They lurked, waiting for a chance to claw their way back, and as much as I wanted to believe the chapter was closed, I had a sinking suspicion she wasn't finished with me yet. When the officers escorted Karen to the squad car, her high-pitched protests carried through the cool night air. She was still insisting she was protecting the community and following HOA protocol, as if that justified her squatting in my home for 2 weeks. But now, instead of her voice having the upper hand, it was drowned out by the flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the marble exterior of my mansion. Neighbors had gathered along the sidewalk, whispering, pulling out their phones, and filming every second. Her power, the smug, untouchable image she had carefully crafted for years, was cracking in front of the very people she ruled over with an iron fist. I didn't follow her immediately. Instead, I walked back inside, determined to document everything before anyone could try twisting the story. The house looked like a scene from a bad reality TV show. Empty champagne bottles scattered on the counters, clothes that clearly weren't mine hanging over chairs, and a lingering smell of cheap perfume clinging to the air. Her little dog had torn into a velvet cushion in the corner, and a pile of new shopping bags, designer brands with receipts inside, sat in my office. All bought within the last week, all charged to my accounts. I took out my phone and recorded every room, narrating what I saw, mentioning the dates, and focusing on the details that made it impossible for her to claim she had just been checking the property. The closet in the master bedroom was the nail in the coffin. My clothes had been pushed to one side, and hers expensive dresses, heels, and even jewelry were lined up like she had moved in permanently. On my nightstand was her name-brand makeup case, and on the floor a half-packed suitcase. This wasn't an HOA inspection. This was a takeover. By the time I stepped outside again, the cops were getting ready to leave, Karen still spitting out a mix of excuses and accusations. One of the officers came over and gave me an update. We're booking her for trespassing and theft, possibly fraud, once the receipts are processed. You'll need to file a full statement tomorrow, but with the footage you showed us tonight, the case is strong. I nodded, feeling that strange mix of relief and disbelief. I'll be there first thing. As Karen was driven away, a hush fell over the crowd. Then, from somewhere in the back, I heard someone mutter, "Guess the HOA president isn't above the law after all." A ripple of murmured agreement followed, and I could feel the tide shifting. People who had been afraid to speak against her were suddenly emboldened. Some even came up to me, apologizing for the times they'd sided with her or asking if I'd be pressing charges. I told them the truth. Yes, I was pressing charges, and I wasn't stopping there. The next morning, after a long shower to wash away the scent of her perfume from my own home, I went straight to the police station. I gave them everything, my videos, the receipts, bank statements showing charges made while I was out of the country, even a copy of my flight records to prove my absence. The detective assigned to the case didn't just nod along. He looked genuinely disgusted. "This is organized," he said. "She knew you'd be gone. She had access to your property records through the HOA, and she took advantage of it." After that, I went to the county clerk's office to make sure her HOA authority couldn't protect her. As it turned out, I wasn't the only one with complaints. For other homeowners had filed smaller grievances against her in the past, but they'd been ignored or dismissed because she controlled the board. Now, with her arrest, those grievances had new life. A special meeting was called within a week, and the turnout was unlike anything I'd seen before. When Karen arrived, escorted by her lawyer, this time instead of the police, she looked nothing like the powerful HOA president she'd been. Her hair was unstyled, her makeup light, and her once confident walk now stiff and defensive. She tried to address the room, but the murmurs and the occasional heckle overpowered her. One by one, neighbors stood up, recounting their own experiences. Fines for things that weren't in the HOA rules. Threats over harmless landscaping choices. Letters about unsuitable decorations. By the time I stood to speak, the mood was already against her. I didn't raise my voice. I simply told my story. How I had returned early. How I had found her living in my home. How she had called the cops on me in my own property. And how I had proof of everything. The room stayed silent except for the occasional gasp when I described her shopping sprees and the damage to my home. And then, when I finished, I played one short video from my phone, the clip where she saw me in my living room and tried to claim the property was under inspection. That was the final straw. The board voted to remove her on the spot, and several members called for a full audit of the HOA's finances during her presidency. She left without making eye contact with anyone, her lawyer following close behind. It took months for the legal process to finish. Karen eventually pled guilty to trespassing and theft to avoid a longer trial. She was ordered to pay restitution, for the property damage and unauthorized charges, though I never expected to see all of that money back. What mattered more was that she could no longer serve in any HOA leadership role again. Her name had been removed from every community document, her keycard access revoked, and her former allies kept their distance. For me, life returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could after something like that. I replaced what was ruined, changed every lock in the house, and had a state-of-the-art security system installed. My neighbors, now free from her micromanaging grip, seemed more relaxed. We even organized a neighborhood barbecue without worrying about violation letters for having too many chairs on someone's lawn. Looking back, I realized Karen's biggest mistake wasn't just breaking into my home, it was underestimating how quickly her carefully built power could crumble when the truth came out. She thought the HOA shielded her from consequences. She thought her title gave her the right to step wherever she pleased. But in the end, all it took was one night, one confrontation, and one well-timed return home to end her reign. Sometimes, you don't need to plan revenge. Sometimes, fate does it for you. For more unbelievable real-life stories like this, make sure to like, share, and comment on the video. And don't forget to subscribe to Bright Reality for your next dose of shocking true tales.